The Street Fighter series events are one of the most confusing things to place correctly in order, only behind Sonic games in my opinion. Even so, I believe I have figured it out with concrete facts. So, let's break down this timeline and get into it. So, no lie, I spent weeks researching, which led me deep diving into every character, and things were still hard to piece together because some characters' events contradict other characters' events. This was grueling, and it is possible I have left out a fact or two, but getting it done and making it make sense was the main goal. To do so, I had to simplify how I took in the information and placed this timeline on the main characters' backs and significant events that can't be misunderstood. So, the chaos begins directly in the first game in the timeline, Street Fighter. Originally, the game's story stated that Saga held a tournament that Ryu entered and won, but that has since been retconned. The story now is that when Ryu arrived in Thailand, he defeats 20 Muay Thai users and yells at the fighters how allowing a stranger to tarnish Muay Thai's reputation is an embarrassment. Saga heard Ryu and his fighting spirit burned. The two would clash with Ryu as the victor. Ryu, however, defeats Saga with a nearly fatal Shoryuken that not only knocks Saga unconscious, but also marks his chest with a great scar. After regaining consciousness and discovering what had happened, Saga swears vengeance on Ryu. Since Ryu had just turned 23 and his birthday is July 21st, 1964, we can place this event in 1987 as the game originally stated. A flight from Japan to Thailand takes around 5 to 6 hours, and there is a 2-hour difference in time between the two places, with Ryu gaining 2 hours. This means that Ryu arrived on the same day he left. Since Muay Thai fighter can train up to 4 to 5 hours a day, I believe Ryu caught them the next day when defeating those 20 fighters. That means these events happened on July 22nd, 1987. In the All About Street Fighter 02 page 10, it states that he had challenged and won against the Emperor of Muay Thai Saga, who was once declared to be the strongest man in the world. He was now the world's strongest martial artist and was supposed to have fulfilled his life's greatest purpose, so to speak. But, had he really fulfilled that purpose? Could he really say I have achieved success? No. Something inside of him shouted. You have yet to achieve success, it said. Without realizing it, Ryu took a stance. In the All About Street Fighter 03 page 444, it states for this same time period after a few months, which implies that after leaving Saga and finding Guken's body, he trained hard for a few months and improved his skills, gaining a new move. In American English, a few would be between 3 and 5. If it were only 2, or perhaps 3, we'd say a couple. Several would probably be about 5 to 7 or 8. With that in mind, when hearing a few months, it would refer to 3 to 5 months. I would lean more to 3 months. So, it would be between August and October or December when his training took place. During this traveling and training, he would have been seen by Sakura, who would become his biggest fan. The events of this game must have occurred after Ryu's victory over Saga during the months of training that Ryu did. Sakura appears in this game, which helps place this game's events in 1987. Sakura's backstory is that she grew up with Hinata Wakaba and Natsu Ayuhara in childhood. Sakura began to participate in street fighting after she saw Ryu on her way to school and trained to emulate his style since. In the game story, Sakura attends Tamagawa Minami High School, but comes to help Hinata and Natsu, now students of the adjacent Teo High and Gorin High respectively, involving herself in the mysterious events throughout Aoharu City and find the people responsible for the school kidnappings and attacks. Upon the end of the Aoharu's inner-city school battles, she realized how much it meant to her to protect something she cared about and wonders if Ryu has something to protect as well. This is what leads to Sakura's actions for being in Street Fighter Alpha 2. To better support the time frame of the game, 14-year-old Japanese students are in 8th grade early and 9th grade before turning 15. Since Sakura is 16 in Alpha 3, this means that she must be 14 in Alpha 2. This would be the first semester of secondary education that year since Japanese schools' first semester runs from April to August, with summer vacation being from July 20th to early September, making this game's events happen between September to December. So, I would place it in September 1987 on the timeline. It was officially stated that Street Fighter Alpha: Warrior's Dreams had been retconned and thrown out to be non-canon, making Street Fighter Alpha 2 the canon continuation of the first Street Fighter game. In Ryu's SFA2 bio from All About Capcom, it states steadily appearing more dignified in the eyes of the groupie named Sakura. In this game, he trains himself after defeating Saga, traveling to various locations pondering the question, what is the meaning of anything in life? He is last seen on Hellfire Island confronting the man who sealed the fate of Master Guken, Akuma. During the fight, it is told that the surge of murderous intent also wielded by Akuma lies dormant within him. In honor of this, a background character was made which was an actual Ryu awakened to the surge of murderous intent, Satsue no Heido and Meta Ryu, also known as Evil Ryu. Also, Ryu is in Ken's ending, which clarifies that his trademark SF2 red headband is something he received from him. This means that Ryu could have ran into Ken a few days after escaping the island. There are many other character interactions that can occur back-to-back that happens in this game, and like I said, I am going to focus on the main characters mostly. Like Saga, who after his fight with Ryu, regained consciousness, trained to learn Tiger Blow for 3 to 5 months, and then fought Sakura to locate Ryu. Lastly, Bison, who has time to fight Guken, search the world for Ryu and other strong fighters, battle Chun-Li, meet up with and battle Charlie 2 times, and having him shot from behind falling off the waterfall. Since these events also seem to be spread out, it's safe to say that the story of Street Fighter Alpha 2 doesn't just take place in late 1987, but from late 1987 to late 1988. A bonus, through my research, I have figured out that Alpha 2 is the start point for the time loop that Rose is stuck in, since this was when she had her first battle with Bison, which she thought she won and left. Since the plot explains that the events of this game happen 1 year after the first rival schools, it's safe to place this game on the timeline in the second semester of school, September to November of 1988. That would make Sakura 15 years old in her 3rd year, 9th grade, of secondary education. For a little more support, look at the weather on the stages. The temperature seems to be cooling down from summer, but not cold like winter, placing the events either in October or November of 1988. In the All About Street Fighter 03 page 45, it states that almost a year ago, the news of Thailand's national hero, Sagat's disappearance, ran around the country. Since those events happened in July of 1987, it is safe to say that Alpha 3 begins at least in July of 1988. It is also stated that Bison got the Psycho Drive up and running, which could have happened after July as well. But I would place the Psycho Drive's activation happening in October, since the last events of Alpha 2 occurred during October of 1988 and Bison had been searching for strong fighter during the events of Alpha 2. Since Sakura is now 16 and has decided to travel the world once more to find Ryu to figure out what street fighting is really about, that would indicate that the main events of this game occur after her birthday, March 15, 1989, and the first semester of 10th grade, secondary education in Japan. Sakura has time to battle Honda, meet Dan in Inode Park, Japan, and travel to India and Thailand to find Ryu, which they both meet up with Blanca on the way. She ditches Dan, finds and fights Maki. Then Sakura and Maki travel together to find Ryu and Guy. Eventually, Sakura, Maki, Guy, Karen and Ken leave Thailand and find Ryu. At that moment, Ryu had already ventured around, fought and lost to Bison because he was in his brainwashed state. All that traveling takes time, a few months at least, and we already discussed that a few months could be 3 to 5 months of time. This places the time between October to December. At this time is when the Psycho Drive was destroyed when looking and reading the given timeline of events from Street Fighter Memorial Archives beyond the world. Rainbow Mika's ending shows that 6 months after the Psycho Drive was destroyed, Zangief finally met our Mika at her home stage for a public bout, and Karen becomes our Mika's sponsor. This means the events of Alpha 3 are at least 7 months of time. Taking account that Alpha 3 is 2 years after the start of Alpha 2, we should start that time after Ryu's training, which would be in October or November. This would place the events of this game are between October/November of 1989 to June/July of 1990. Referencing All About Street Fighter 03 page 444 again, it shows that the events of Street Fighter 2 happened 3 to 4 years after Street Fighter Alpha 3. This makes sense since all the characters look older than their Alpha designs. Also, it allows their developed backstory events to make sense as well. For example, Cammy, who was in a coma, retrained after waking up and was accepted to join Delta Red to bring down Shadaloo. The events of this game are set up by Bison for the purpose of taking Ryu's body for himself. He manages to get a new body and leave Rose's body back into his new one. The time needed to set things up could have happened in the time skip between the two games. The tournament itself shouldn't have taken more than a day if it was invite only. If it was an open tournament, depending on the number of warriors, it could have taken up to a week with fights happening on different days. We will look at the events of the game as these are the final 16 participants. In Ken's ending, there is a 2-month gap mentioned as Ken marries Eliza and finds out she is pregnant. I believe this is around the time frame that Guken is awake and was learning of his students' travels and experiences. Taking into account that a pregnancy takes 9 months and she found out she was pregnant 2 months after the events of the game, place the events in July fits best. I will give more details on Eliza and Ken's kids being an extremely helpful tool in connecting the time between the early games and later games in the Street Fighter 4 series section. So, the events of this game takes place from July 1993 to September 1993 and couldn't happen in 1991 because Ken's son age wouldn't fit how he looked and how he acted in Street Fighter V. When looking at the character designs, there was almost no change to them, and I would take that as the time between Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 4 not being long. In story, it is stated that after awakening 2 years later, Guken leaves his dojo and tailed his students, pleased that they have come so far. Paying attention to the word tail means that he has been awake for some time now. The 2 years would place that event in October/November of 1991, during the time skip between Alpha 3 and Street Fighter 2. He most likely watched them all the way through the World Warrior Tournament as well. This means that the events start a few months before the SIN tournament. After hearing about the SIN tournament, Ryu and the other World Warriors decide to enter for their own reasons. Sakura, who would be 20 years old, which make her look crazy for staying in her schoolgirl uniform or that she got held back from skipping school so much, Dan and Blanca together take a cruise ship to get to the tournament location. In Sakura's character prologue, she endures a grueling self-imposed training regime. The tournament grounds for the SIN tournament seem to be in the USA at an unknown location. A cruise takes 24 days, 3 weeks and 3 days, from Los Angeles, California, United States to Tokyo, Japan. So, Sakura trained for that long, possibly longer, before the start of the tournament. That time span would make most training tough to get through. The tournament seems to take a full day to conclude, making it safe to say a month worth of events occurred during the start of Street Fighter 4. When the tournament concluded, Ryu is made unconscious by Guken sealing the Satsui no Hado, meaning they must have briefly fought. Then Guken fought Akuma, which would have lasted a while unless it was interrupted. The main fact is that at the end, Mel is born. Mel's birthday is February 8th, meaning 9 months have passed since Eliza getting pregnant and the end of Street Fighter 4. She must have been 4 months pregnant during Ken's Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo ending. Women's pregnancy usually becomes noticeable during the second trimester, 4 months. The belly starts showing signs between 16 to 20 weeks, 4 to 5 months, meaning Eliza's image in Ken's ending doesn't disprove this time frame. This also shows that all the events from the end of Street Fighter II to the end of Street Fighter IV happens in a 5-month time frame. This means the end of Street Fighter IV occurred in February of 1994. Now, there is a time skip that was never explained, where an older Sakura meets Ryu when she was walking her dog. I believe this time skip to be 2 years after Street Fighter IV. It gives a good amount of time for Sakura to graduate from high school and integrate into life after. She would be 22 years old, which makes sense because she no longer was in her schoolgirl uniform while Ryu seemed to have just arrived back into Japan to go meet up with Guken for help. So, the time skip would have happened around April of 1996, when looking at the weather that it was in Japan around that time. It's been officially stated by Capcom that the events of Street Fighter V occur before and after Street Fighter III. Since we have that fact, now we need to see how far before and how far after Street Fighter III do these events happen. I believe that Ryu's prologue is directly linked to that time skip from Street Fighter IV's Ryu and Sakura meet up. It must be a few months, 4 months, worth of time that Ryu spent with Guken controlling the Satsui no Hado. This would put these events in August of 1996 and Ryu would be 31 years old in his prologue. Since Mel seemed to be around 3 years old, since he was able to walk, talk, and mimic Ken's movement, the time is appropriate. The events of A Shadow's Fall seem to take a week worth of time. The traveling and training between Ryu and Ken just can't be done in 2 days. Plus, infiltrating Shadowloo's HQ would take time to develop and execute. Because of the time it takes for those types of events to happen, I would place the events of A Shadow's Fall to happen around or not long after Sakura's birthday, March-May, since she was not present in the battle and in college. When she is included in the story, she is seen having battle and hanging out with new and old friends, hinting to it being summertime. In Japan, summer vacation for universities is September to October, meaning a few months, 3 to 5, has passed since A Shadow's Fall. Karen's statement of her explaining when the last time she seen Ryu fits this time frame. Referencing the All About Street Fighter 03 page 444 one last time, it also shows that Street Fighter 3 Second Impact occurs 3 to 4 years after Street Fighter 2. This closes the gap and makes everything that happens before Street Fighter's Second Impact clearer. Since Street Fighter II ends in September 1993 and Street Fighter 3 Second Impact occurs in 1997, it is safe to say that the 4-year statement is the one to go by when looking at the years. Placing the start of the events of this game in September or October of 1997. Since Sakura is still in college, it would explain why she isn't in Street Fighter 3 Second Impact or Third Strike. When looking at Ed's character story in Street Fighter V, he fights Balrog right after the events ended and went his own way. Months pass and he was seen forming a new organization, Neo Shadaloo. The statement months past places that during the events of Second Impact. In the story of Second Impact, it seems that Gil went around defeating strong fighters to reveal him and his plans to the world. Street Fighter V also shows this happening too. The Third World Warrior Tournament seems to start between a week to a month worth of time after the defeat of Tom by the hands of Gil. This tournament was meant to find warriors strong enough to repopulate the world after its end. At some point close to the end of the tournament, Akuma attacks and kills Gil, then leaves only for Gil to resurrect himself unscathed from the battle. At the end of the tournament, Gil is defeated by Alex and takes an interest in Alex because he sees something special. I only mention that because Capcom can't let that turn into a plot hole and should be addressed in Street Fighter VI. But back to the timeline. The few events after the tournament like Necro and Effie escaping, Oro choosing Ryu to be his student after defeating him, Urien winning presidency over Gil only to find out that Gil was promoted to Emperor, it is safe to say that they are spread out over a year's time leading right into Third Strike. From an interview in Gamist MOOC Volume 81, Street Fighter III New Generation Fan Book page 85, it states that Street Fighter III was an event from 1997 to 2000X, so let's say Ryu, born in 1964, is 33 years old. When listening to Sean when he is about to face Ken, he says, "Master, I'm not the same person that I was a year ago." This is exactly what it states to be, a year from the previous version of the game, making the game's events occur in October 1998 and Ryu now being 34 years old. In this game, Alex has gotten past his troubles and faces Ryu, only to lose and become obsessed with fighting him again. It states that he does get the chance to do so, but doesn't make it clear how long after he does. Since that interview made the statement that the events of Street Fighter III is from 1997 to 2000X and Alex's second travels is implied to be the last events of the game, it is safe to assume that Alex trained and competed in many more fights before facing Ryu again. So, I would think that this rematch would occur no more than 3 years after, since Ryu moves around and trains himself in different locations and environments. So, I would place this rematch in late 2001. In Street Fighter V, everyone who encounters G does so during the events of the tournament or after the events of the tournament. Gil's prologue explained that it happens after the events of Street Fighter III. This would mean that Gil defeated G sometime in late 1998 or early 1999. This battle seems like it would have occurred during the battle between Oro and Akuma, knowing Akuma would have been attracted to fight the winner of the two but didn't. Now, the biggest question of the timeline, how far in the future is Street Fighter VI? Well, we have one character that is shown that links back to Street Fighter III and Street Fighter V, Li-Fun. Looking at Li-Fun, she is not quite the age Chun-Li was when during Alpha 2, which was 18. So, I use a Chinese child growth chart to see what age she would have been in Street Fighter III Third Strike using her height and weight. The chart showed that on average young girls at the age of 8 fits her description. This means she was born in 1990. After looking at some research blogs, it stated that some Chinese children begin their kung fu training between the ages of 4 and 10 years old. Fei Lin would fit into that as well, as she was seeing training in Chun-Li's Third Strike ending. To be a programmer at the age of 8 years old meant she was a genius, and she could apply that to learning Chinese Kenpo. They say on average, it takes 4 to 5 years to get a black belt in American Kenpo. I would assume it being around the same time for Chinese Kenpo as well. With these facts and it looking like Li-Fun has become at the level of a black belt, I would say she would be at least the same age as Sakura when starting, age 14. When looking at the fight footage of Chun-Li and Li-Fun, she looks to be around 4 feet 11 inches to 5 feet 1 inch tall compared to Chun-Li's 5 feet and 7 inches tall. When looking up that average height for Asian females, the results came back with an average of 15 and 16 years old. That would mean Li-Fun most likely is 16 years old and Street Fighter VI would be 8 years after Street Fighter III Third Strike in late 2006. Possibly 3 to 4 years depending on the 2000X commit made in that interview. So, the timeline goes as follows. 1987, the events of Street Fighter and rival schools happen. 1987 through 1988, the events of Street Fighter Alpha 2 occur. 1988, the events of Project Justice happen. 1988 through 1990, the events of Street Fighter Alpha 3 occur. 1993, the events of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo happen. 1993 through 1996, the events of Super Street Fighter 4 occur. 1996 through 1997, the events of A Shadow's Fall happen. 1997 through 1998, the events of Street Fighter 3 Second Impact and some character stories from Street Fighter V Arcade Edition occur. 1998 through 2001, the events of Street Fighter III Third Strike and some character stories from Street Fighter V Champion Edition occur. 2006, the events of Street Fighter VI ends the timeline. Well, this took forever, but I got everyone a consistent map through the timeline of these games. Trust me, there is more info out there that can be put into support, but I wanted to get to the point and give some dates/years that each game in the timeline would have been in. Now, for the final fight timeline, that should be way easier and which I will be getting to next. Thanks for watching, and until next time, warriors.